I want to say on behalf of Syracuse University's Newhouse School of Public Communications, we want to say welcome to the 2025 Toner Prizes celebration. My name is Mark Lodato, and I'm Dean of the Newhouse School, and tonight we have what promises to be an enlightening program to discuss what's happening in the field of political journalism, both in Washington and in our local communities. We're especially excited to bring the Toner celebration here to the university's fabulous new hub in Washington, D.C. for the very first time. This dynamic space, which serves as the home of the Newhouse D.C. program, builds on what is already a thriving presence for Syracuse University here in our nation's capital. I'm so glad to be able to welcome Stephen Portnoy from ABC News Radio and fellow Newhouse alumnus Boris Sanchez from CNN, as well as our other featured guest, Meredith Perez Wadsworth from the Knight Foundation. Maribel. Stephen, Boris, and Maribel, thank you in advance for joining us and sharing your perspectives at this important juncture in our industry. And of course, we'll also honor the winners of the 2025 Toner Prizes for excellence in political reporting, the journalists from Reuters in the national reporting category and NJ Advanced Media in the local reporting category. Welcome to you all. But before we move on, allow me to take a couple moments to recognize some guests in the audience with us tonight. First of all, welcome to Chancellor Kent Severud and Professor of Practice, Dr. Ruth Chen, as well as distinguished members of the Syracuse University Board of Trustees, Newhouse Advisory Board, and Newhouse Emerging Leaders. Your support means so much to the Robin Toner program in political reporting. Also here are Dean Terrence Lau from the College of Law and Dean David Van Slyke from the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs. Welcome to you both. At Syracuse, our commitment to strengthening trust in news media, governance, and society remains steadfast through the Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship, headquartered here at our facility. This is a joint initiative of the Newhouse and Maxwell schools based right here, and this institute was made possible in part by the generosity of Syracuse University alumni Kathy Daykoff, Larry Kramer, and Mila Lerner, who are all with us tonight. So thank you all. Thank you also to the faculty and staff from Newhouse who have traveled from Syracuse to join us tonight, and a special thank you to our Newhouse students who are here as well. Now, forgive me for taking a moment to boast about Newhouse as we mark our 60th anniversary this year. Our founding mission from SI Newhouse was to provide the best journalism education in the country. That mission endures. Our rich legacy is embodied in the work of generations of accomplished journalists and storytellers, from Larry Kramer and Robin Toner to Stephen Portnoy and Boris Sanchez. That mission is carried forward by our accomplished faculty and staff who are dedicated to making sure our journalism students move seamlessly into newsrooms after graduation. And it's embodied by our current Newhouse students, like the ones who are with us this evening. Our journalism students possess the skills and determination to become the White House correspondents, campaign reporters, and investigative journalists of the future. For the rest of our guests, I hope you've had a chance to meet these talented students and learn about why Newhouse is, in my opinion, the very best communications school in the country. 5 decades ago, another student was honing her talents at Newhouse in preparation for what would become an illustrious career in journalism. And this is a fitting segue to our featured conversation. Oops, hold on. I'm talking, of course, about the late Robin Toner, the first woman to hold the position of Chief National Political Correspondent for the New York Times. Robin was a 1976 Syracuse graduate with a bachelor's degree in journalism from Newhouse and political science from Maxwell. The Toner Prizes honors Robin's legacy, and now here to share more about Robin and the Toner program is her husband, Peter Goslin. Peter, come on up.
Thanks, Mark, and a number of other thanks are in order. To those of you here tonight who are in the political trenches in this last wild year, and especially to tonight's prize winners. To our generous sponsors, including John Chappell, a Syracuse classmate of Robin's, who underwrote the Toner program at its inception and has given generously since. And to all of you who, in coming out tonight, help ensure that Robin's legacy of spare, fact-based political reporting lives on. This is the first year I haven't helped to organize this event. It needed to change, but still be grand, especially for the winners. And it is. And for that, I'm grateful to Dean Lodato and his team, including Amanda Griffin and Carol Satchwell, and to the Washington Institute Director, Margaret Believe. When Chappell and I were starting the program, some of the early signs of trouble, both for journalism and our politics, were already apparent. One of the books I was reading at the time was by Thomas Cahill, How the Irish Saved Civilization. The basic idea here was that the monks, holed up in their protected keeps during the Dark Ages, kept Western knowledge alive by copying it into illuminated manuscripts. The idea plays to the heart and prejudices of almost anyone who has even an ounce of Irish blood, and it most certainly would have played to Robin's prejudices. I did consider the program something of a monastery, aimed at helping to preserve the values of fact-based political coverage if bad times were to come. Reading this year's winning entries, I had two thoughts. The first is that the bad times are now all around us. Political polarization, violence, a threat to our core values, and the government that's been central to our trying to live up to those values. The second thought was that our winners did something much braver in their reporting than the Irish monks did in their copying. Because there's no staying in the protected keep of a newsroom to get a good story. You gotta go out and report it. And you've gotta speak out to tell it. I'm grateful to tonight's winners for their service in both regards. And on behalf of my family, I'm pleased we can recognize their fine work in Robin's name.
Thank you very much, Peter, for being here tonight and for your tireless efforts over the years to support of the Toner program. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Stephen Portnoy, who is a national correspondent for ABC News Radio and past president of the White House Correspondents Association. One of America's leading audio storytellers, Stephen has more than 2 decades of experience covering Washington, having reported on everything from presidential inaugurations to congressional debates to Supreme Court arguments and more. Stephen previously worked at CBS News Radio, where he covered the White House and Congress. His stellar work has earned an Edward R. Murrow Award for breaking news, another for continuing coverage, and overall excellence. Stephen is also a strong believer in the power of mentorships and growth opportunities. We are so grateful at Newhouse for his support to expand the White House Correspondents Association Scholarship Program. A 2003 graduate of Newhouse, Stephen is a respected advocate for colleagues in journalism and the profession overall. Tonight, he is taking a few minutes to discuss the state and continued importance of political journalism in Washington and beyond. So please join me in welcoming Stephen Portnoy.
Thank you, Dean. Good evening to all of you, and thank you for having me in this beautiful space. This is incredible. We journalists, as so many of us know, are much more comfortable talking about other people's stories than ourselves. So you'll forgive me, as I've been invited to speak about the importance of political journalism in this moment, I might become a bit uncomfortable. 22 years ago, when I was a Newhouse student, I embarked on a career that had me working just a few blocks from here, just a few paces away from some of the great legends of broadcasting. Sam Donaldson, Ted Koppel, Cokie Roberts, Ann Compton, Carol Simpson, and on very special days, Peter Jennings himself. I often think of them and of others who've gone on to the great newsroom in the sky, and I try to think of what they would do if they were here in this moment, under the current economic pressures of our industry, under the white-hot scrutiny that today's reporters face. And then I reflect on how they might remember. In the early 1950s, many journalists were labeled communist sympathizers. In 1954, Edward R. Murrow was called the leader of a jackal pack. In the late 1960s, Lyndon Johnson kicked reporters off his plane. In 1969, Richard Nixon's vice president gave a famous speech in which he said a small unelected elite of network newsmen had been injecting their bias into the homes of Americans 5 nights a week. And Nixon, of course, later put journalists on his own enemies list. As we know, starting in the late 1980s and continuing to the present day, a great political campaign has been waged against the mainstream, drive-by, legacy, corporate media, whatever you want to call it, however you want to define it. And of late, this pummeling of the press has occurred across the political spectrum, not just on one side of it. You can track the remarkable effectiveness of this largely untested, largely uncontested, relentless campaign in surveys and polls. The increasingly negative view that Americans have of us and our work has not occurred without some degree of error and misjudgment on our part. A decent amount of self-reflection is important in the analysis. But in this environment, as public confidence in journalism wanes and as consumer habits change, our ability to do this important work is increasingly coming under threat. Dangerous precedents are right now being set by officials in our government. The obvious intent is to intimidate journalists and to have a chilling effect on the questions we ask, on the stories we pursue, on the language we use. In case you haven't heard, the acting U.S. attorney for this federal district has vowed, his words, vigilance against news outlets such as the Associated Press, who he has said refuse to put America first. The Federal Communications Commission has recently revived or initiated investigations into ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, NPR, and many of their stations. Under the guise of fairness, the Defense Secretary has ousted some of the nation's leading news outlets from their long-standing workspaces at the Pentagon. And the White House has determined that it should decide who gets to cover the president in those spaces where he most often engages with the press. You may be tracking along with me the catalog of sycophantic questions that he's been asked recently by friendly outlets. It's growing by the day. And despots all over the world are watching. But of greater concern to me is that all of this is being viewed with awe in state capitals, and in city halls, and in municipal buildings, and in sheriff's offices all across America. It takes a special set of skills to do the work that's being honored here tonight, and certain personal qualities as well. It requires open-mindedness, fortitude, gumption, ingenuity, patience, and persistence. And along with all of that, it takes a great deal of trustworthiness, a demonstration of integrity to earn the confidence of sources. Tonight, we honor the best work, which enhances the public's understanding of the people who would govern us, the character they demonstrate, the actions they take, the earnings they tax, the funds they spend or cut, the lives they dramatically affect with the power they've been given by the rest of us as our great experiment in self-governance continues. Today, there's an entire generation of children being raised, learning in schools about our founding principles. Those children and their teachers may ask what freedom of the press means today and what it might mean in the future. It would be helpful for them and for us to remember that freedom of the press was not devised just to protect the rights of pamphleteers, the newsmen of the day. It was also intended by the framers to guard the right and the ability of a self-governing people to have access to ideas that might run counter to the views of those in power. This concept has been tested through our history. It has endured, but it cannot be defended merely by the reporters doing the work. As ever, strength is required amongst the executives, the senior editors, the lawyers, the finance teams, the analysts, and ultimately the owners, each of whom are right now deciding as they eye negative revenue projections and weigh their own varied interests. whether and to what extent they will fight for America's First Amendment freedoms. We reporters need today's bosses to continue demonstrating the courage of their predecessors, the ones who hold vaunted places in our history, like Katharine Graham, Abe Rosenthal, Frank Stanton, and others. Of course, what's needed most is the continued public confidence in our work among the hundreds of millions who subscribe, watch, listen, and care about their rights to learn about their world from a free and independent press. I believe that, as it always has, confidence in our profession will come from us asserting our independence, adhering closely to our standards and ethics, and doubling down on responsible, straightforward, and at times expensive storytelling to produce the kind of work we honor here. So please, all of you, keep at it. If I may, a brief word to the Newhouse students in the room. I hope you share my feelings about the importance of an independent, responsible press. Many of us do earnestly believe in the notion that the public decides the country's course, and that our role is to facilitate the democratic process by empowering Americans to reach their own conclusions. I don't know if anyone has ever written a code of ethics for influencers. I'll leave you students with one of my favorite quotes from Edward R. Murrow. It's a 1958 call to humility for broadcasters, but I think it could certainly apply to anybody today. He said roughly, "Your voice, amplified so it reaches from one end of the country to the other, does not confer upon you greater wisdom than when your voice reached only to the other end of the bar." It's good advice for all of us, this reporter included. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for your advocacy on behalf of journalism and for you being here tonight with us. It was terrific. And this, of course, is a fitting segue to our featured conversation. Now we're going to turn our attention a little more to what's happening at the state and local level, though I suspect we will be touching on what's happening here in Washington as well. Maribel Perez Wadsworth is president and CEO of the Knight Foundation and was previously president of Gannett Media and publisher of USA Today. At Gannett, Maribel drove the company's digital transformation, while Gannett Newsrooms earned 5 Pulitzer Prizes under her leadership. Our moderator is Boris Sanchez, co-anchor of CNN News Central, which airs weekday afternoons. Boris has been on the air for some of the country's biggest stories over the last few years, including presidential elections, the January 6th riot, and social justice protests. He previously served as a White House correspondent for CNN. So please join me in welcoming Maribel Perez Wadsworth and Boris Sanchez.
Thank you so much. Is this on? Okay, good. Thank you so much to Dean Lodato and to Stephen for those comments. I think I speak on behalf of Maribel when I say that we were touched by some of what you shared. And we're honored that all of you are here tonight. I see some familiar faces and some that I'm eager to meet at the reception afterwards. I'm really excited to be here to speak to Maribel, in part because we share a common background. We're both Miami Cubans that have made it in journalism against certain odds. What could go wrong having us up here tonight, right? That having been said, I want to start off by picking up where Stephen left off. We are roughly 62 or 63 days into a new administration, one that historically has been adversarial to the press. Stephen listed off some of the ways in which this administration is seeming to attempt to shape how it is covered. I wonder how you think it's going so far in these early days.
Goodness, what a question, Toledo. So I think I'd point us back to Stephen's very important words right before he started talking about the current administration and the very long history of some adversarial relationships, some pushing of boundaries, in past administrations. We see this not only on the national level, but also at the state and local level, right? This relationship between the media, the press, and those who hold power in our government, there's often been tension. What we're seeing, no question, is pushing the boundaries further. And it is time, as you noted, for people to stand with courage and defend the First Amendment.
I think we can all agree on that. I promised Maribel before we started that I wouldn't ask her whether she would call it the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America. So we're going to stay away from that. But I do have a bit of a personal question to ask. And this is, I ask from a personal perspective for advice for me. I mentioned that we were both Cuban-American from Miami. I can imagine that our family stories are very similar. The immigrant experience in coming to this country and fleeing a regime that silenced the press very violently. I wonder what it's like for you to work in an industry where you have to separate your personal feelings, watching some of what we watched unfold, not only with the relationship between the White House and the press, but also between this administration and immigrants who are coming to this country, fleeing repressive regimes. What is it like for you to set aside your own personal feelings watching that and go into work every day knowing that objectivity is the name of the game?
Look, objectivity is absolutely critical insofar as our aim is to seek the truth wherever it shall lead us. And I do think that is the objective. But that life experience, I think, is also important to helping to provide a fuller picture, to having the kind of understanding, if not empathy, then certainly understanding who's most affected by these decisions. How do we ensure that the full story is being told? Having an experience of being a first-generation American, one who's like yours, whose parents came from Cuba, who had everything, schools shut down, and no access to free press, et cetera. That informs some of what you bring to seeking the truth in the context of what's happening now.
It's no irony that I think we both ventured into journalism as part of that inheritance. Focusing on some of the important work that the Knight Foundation does with local level reporting. Do some of those challenges translate into your work to try to build up local newsrooms?
Well, look, even as we talk about everything that's happening sort of from a national perspective, we're talking about the current administration in the White House, we talk about all the divisions and polarization, and all of that is talked about in so many ways through a very national lens. And the truth is, at the end of the day, people are living, existing, working with one another, engaging with one another on a very local level. And all politics at the end of the day is very local, right? So I believe it is absolutely crucial, and the reason that at Knight Foundation we really turn our attention to the local space is because I think that that's our path forward. Even as we talk about all the mistrust in the media, the latest Pew research shows 85% of people still trust their local news outlets. That's a position of strength that we have to lean into if we're going to find a path forward, if we're going to find common ground again, if we're going to hopefully try to find solutions to the many problems that we face as a society from a place of strength and a place where we can have a common conversation with one another.
I do wonder, and Stephen alluded to this in his remarks, how much economic pressure weighs into the equation, especially in local reporting, because it's much harder to have, for example, an investigative unit than it used to be.
Yes. Well, it is, I think, the economic pressures have really limited. I don't need to tell the folks in this room, you all understand it, have really incredibly diminished the amount of reporting firepower that exists in local communities. The number of news deserts grows by the week. That is an enormous problem. But I think one of the ways that pressure has really manifest is in a place of scarce resources where newsrooms are having to pick and choose what they can cover. Most often, they land in a place of saying, What we can do uniquely is watchdog journalism. What we can do uniquely is investigative reporting. That is true, and that is crucially important. What we're missing in that equation, though, is we're no longer fully covering these communities. What once used to be, whether it was a local television station, a local newspaper, a place where you could really feel and experience the full community, the interesting things people were doing, new businesses coming and going, what's happening in your kids' school, high school sports, arts and culture, those things have fallen by the wayside simply because there's not the resource to focus on it. And guess what? If what you're talking to people about, if what you're publishing on a day in and day out basis is generally all the problems that exist, it's important to do that. But that's going to be a problem for trust because the community continues to experience some of these other things that are also important about what makes that place the place. And they're not seeing that in your coverage, so they feel that perhaps you're only in it for the gotcha stuff. And I think it's not been because anybody doesn't want to do these stories. I think it's been a bit of a tension point in the scarcity of resource that's led us down this path.
I wonder whether you can draw a line between the lessons that you've learned, which you sort of just alluded to with trying to bolster local reporting into national reporting, because as you might imagine, I have some selfish interest in where this thing goes nationally as well.
I think that the through line for me is, are we actually in touch with the people we're doing this work for? I think for too often across journalism, and this is true in other sectors, this might be even true in higher ed, we approach the case from the standpoint of we know. We are the deciders, we are the ones who curate what is news, we decide. We decide on what the priority is. And at the end of the day, I fear that we have lost touch with who we're meant to be serving. I think that is true in local. I think that is true at the national level even more so. Because in local, you might still run into that reporter at the grocery store and talk to them directly about whatever the issue is. And I think that that's a real challenge. We have to spend more time in communities understanding what's happening. We talk about the economy, and we talk about it in broad strokes. But if you don't understand what the effects of inflation are actually in local Main Street businesses, you're not going to be able to tell the full story. People aren't going to be able to relate to the story you're telling.
There's also the question of competition. And there's far more competition, even from outlets that have nothing to do with journalism, that don't actually attempt journalism.
Yeah.
How do you navigate the attention economy, and especially when it comes to folks getting their information, even at the local level, from outlets that don't have a code of ethics, that don't have the same sort of rigid standards for what they publish and what they put out?
I think we can learn from them. Not trading on the standards and the ethics, that's our domain and we should never compromise on that. But I think we can learn from the influencers, from the social media stars about how to engage with audiences, about how to meet them where they are, about how to speak in more relatable ways and sharing information. I think there's a lot about the work that they do that we can learn from in terms of better engagement, new formats, new ways of connecting with people. And at the end of the day, that's what we need to do. Because we could be doing the most important journalism for our communities, that if it's not connecting with an audience, and if that audience then is not informed by that, and even better, prodded to act on that information, then what have we accomplished? So I think that there's a lot that we can learn from these newer outlets, as you say, or influencers or what have you. I think that there's a lot that they could probably learn from us in terms of, the principles of ethical conduct for journalists.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think we all agree there. There's been some debate, given recent headlines, about how billionaires or government/taxpayers should be relied on to fund journalism at multiple levels versus the subscriber model or advertisers or foundations. How have these developments, for example, with the LA Times, the Washington Post, shaped your thinking around these issues?
Well, for starters, billionaire ownership is not a business model. And I don't mean that because of the obvious potential for influence and crossing of lines that should not be crossed in terms of the independence of the newsroom. Philanthropy is not a business model. At the end of the day, we need to be creating a product, the journalism, that people see value in, and that they're willing to engage with, and that they're willing to potentially spend money on, that businesses want to support, that communities want to support. I do think that a revenue stream can be philanthropy, and not all billionaire owners are, potentially going to cross the lines, and that's fine. I think that there are public policy, possibilities. We've seen this particularly at the state level. Nothing much has moved at the federal level, but in the state level, you've seen support for employment tax credits for newsrooms and that sort of thing. That is not a long-term solution, but it is a way to extend runway while the industry continues to change from a business model perspective.
I also think there's something to be said for who is going to be doing the journalism.
Yeah.
And we were speaking previously, and I shared with you my experience of being very broke as a young journalist, getting calls from my mom because I wasn't answering the bank's calls, because I wasn't paying the loans, because I couldn't afford them. My first job in TV, I made very little money. And so I wonder what advice you would have, not only to the young journalists, aspiring journalists in the room, but also those who have a vested interest in their success in a field that economically is becoming much more challenging to enter.
No, it is. Look, and it has been. And you shared what you made in that first job, and it wasn't honestly.
It's a punchline to a joke that I won't repeat it.
Yeah, I know. It's tough. It's a tough business. But I will say, even as we were talking earlier about working at the White House and working at a big national entity, whether it's CNN or ABC or the Post or the Times, that's great. But to the students specifically in the room, I really, really, really hope you aspire to spend some time in even your hometowns. Go back to your local communities, spend time there, do good quality journalism there. And I think the rest of us really need to figure out the pathways to supporting that. I'm starting to see in some schools, and we're happy to partner with them, offering some loan repayments for students, graduates who then go work in local communities. We see programs like Report for America, which partners with newsrooms in local communities all over the country, helping to subsidize that reporter's salary. These are models that I think are important for us to continue to scale, because at the end of the day, with no offense intended to present company and all the good work they do, you don't need more reporters in Washington and New York. We really, truly need them in Tallahassee, and we need them in Phoenix, and we need them in every small community across this country, because that's how we will rebuild trust. That's how we will secure our democracy, is making sure that we are telling the stories and holding government to account, starting at the local level, at the state level. It's crucially important. It is vital that you spend some of your time, maybe a lot of your time. I spent 27 years in the local news business, and I can't express to you how much that is my one hope for you.
I wonder how higher education institutions like Newhouse can boost that.
Yeah. Well, for one, it's great, and this is a wonderful school, that you're educating great journalists. And to be clear, every one of you coming out of the Newhouse School is poised to be a great journalist, and that's terrific. I really want you also to connect the dots on the business of journalism. It is so crucially important for our journalism schools to help educate the next leaders in journalism to understand how their work drives the business, how their work connects with audience, how their work drives revenues. That is not a bad thing. It is a vitally important thing. Why? Because you might be the ones who help us figure out the business model transformation that's needed to sustain journalism. And so we need to connect those dots, and I really believe that our very best journalism schools will be working across interdisciplinary fashion with their other schools and colleges to help with business, engineering, marketing. We need these other skills, and we need our journalists to have them.
You have a unique skill set in that you transition from local news reporting to being on the business side and making significant decisions when it comes to revenue. What does the model look like going forward? Do you foresee more entities merging? Do you foresee scale being the answer?
I don't think there's one model. Everyone talks, and I probably just did, about business model transformation like there's one model. I don't think that's the case. I think there are a lot of different forms that we can go in a lot of different directions. People have been suggesting the death of advertising for a long, long time. Advertising revenues are still a really big part of the business, and I suspect will be for some time to come. There are membership models, and whether that's, donations from members or actual subscriptions. We've talked about some of the other forms of revenue. I don't think there's one model. There's not-for-profit, there's for-profit, and there's going to be a lot of individuals creating news and information, and doing that, by the way, with the appropriate ethics in place, and that in itself can be a model. I don't know that there's one model. I do know that we have to be a lot more willing to experiment, a lot more willing to, frankly, learn from the audiences who are going to be the consumers of this information for the foreseeable future. I don't think we've spent enough time learning, frankly, from our students, learning from generations even younger about the habits that they're bringing into their news consumption or information consumption as they grow, because those will be their rituals, right? Those will be their rituals as they get older, and we need to understand that better.
Building on your thoughts and your call to students to pursue local journalism, I wonder what you think is a story or set of stories, set of issues that we who have been transfixed on Washington with good reason have maybe missed at the local level.
Goodness. Well, I'll tell you, while all eyes are trained on Washington, you have local governments, you have state governments that are completely reshaping. They're reshaping the economies, they're reshaping what rights people have in their states, and I'm not sure that we're really connecting the dots on that in very effective ways. There's a lot of sort of one-off coverage. Local news is doing their best, but we need that, cohesively to be told as America's story right now. You're seeing, people running for school boards as a launch pad to higher office, people who are not necessarily qualified to be in, making decisions about education of students, and, really consequential decisions that are happening. And I don't think we have anywhere near enough coverage or expert coverage, because again, the scarcity has meant we've lost our beat coverage and real development of beat expertise, at the local level and elsewhere. And I think it's really, really important that we get back to that.
What would be your fundamental advice to those in local news about that development of expertise?
I would say work to focus and prioritize. While I wouldn't necessarily love seeing a lot more consolidation, I do think better collaboration across the industry is important. I do think where you still have the benefit of having, 2 or 3 outlets offering news in a local community, you might have a public media station, you might have one of the broadcast stations. You might have a local newspaper. You don't all have to use your precious few resource to cover all the things. So think about where you might specialize, and together you're telling the full story of that community, and together you're playing that important watchdog role. So I think, while we were joking about the competitiveness of the news business, that keeps us sharp on one hand. I actually think it's costing us opportunity on the other, because I think we could be doing a better job, for the people we serve, if we were doing things a little bit more collaboratively.
As we start winding down the conversation, I do hope that you'll leave us on a positive note, an optimistic one, certainly. How do you feel generally about the future of journalism, given the amount of economic and technological disruption that we've seen in just the last few years?
Well, I'm a hardwired optimist, so that's a good question for me. And people ask me, so I get the what keeps you up at night, but I actually prefer this question. I will tell you, having spent the last year, I've been at Knight Foundation a little over a year, and having spent the last year traveling to cities all over the country, spending time in those communities with civic leaders, spending time with the business community, spending time with a lot of young people, I am incredibly heartened about how much we all still care deeply about our cities. We care about each other. We want to do right by those things, and I have seen this, really loud and clear amongst our student journalists. I have, school to school. I just had the real blessing of having some student journalists at the Knight Media Forum a few weeks ago, and listening to them tell their own personal stories of the ways that they're not just covering their institutions, they are covering their communities, and they are making an enormous difference and adding to the coverage in really, truly meaningful ways. That gives me tremendous hope, especially since when I got into this business, I didn't think I'd ever, make it rich in journalism, but I didn't think I'd starve either. And I will tell you that these young people today, tremendous courage, tremendous passion to make the choice to get into this business, knowing how hard it is and still wanting to fight that fight. Bravo, and thank you.
Bravo to them. And on that note, Maribel, a pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right, how about one more hand for Maribel and Boris for that important conversation. And don't worry, team, I was taking some notes about what journalism schools can do to continue to improve in the future. We, of course, share this commitment to do all we can to help media outlets fill news deserts and keep local communities informed. And I want to say thank you to the Knight Foundation for leading the way in this space with their Press Forward initiative. But now it's time to turn our attention towards the awards portion of our program. I think most of us in this room probably know Margaret Talev and her esteemed career in journalism. So let me just say how proud we are to have her as the Kramer Director of the Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship, and as a professor of journalism at the Newhouse School. Please join me in welcoming Margaret Talev.
Okay, let's do that every Monday night. Awesome. I want to say a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here on this spectacular, isn't it like a spectacular night? It was raining, now it's beautiful, and thanks to you for being here as well. I also owe a quick apology to the events team, including Amanda Griffin, because they said, we're over capacity, and I said, it's Washington, nobody ever shows up. Take 300 RSVPs, that will fill the room. I was wrong. And you were right. So we really do appreciate all of you being here. We're about to actually introduce our honorees. I'm going to do the smart brevity version of my earlier remarks. The institute that I'm involved with here, the IDJC, What we do is we research, we teach, and we engage public dialogue about the relationship between what we've been talking about tonight, the relationship between media, the kind of government you get, and people's ability to understand how the system works so that they can participate civically. So for any of you who I haven't gotten a chance to talk to yet, we would love to have your involvement, your attendance at events, your expertise, your networks, anything that you can contribute to helping us think about how to build this. Come find me later. We're not going to talk about it right now. Look, among the other things we talk about, building up local reporting in news deserts really can help Americans in communities around the country get information about what is happening in their towns. And so tonight you will be seeing some of the best local reporting as well as some of the best national reporting in that political space. Okay, I think I've said enough. Let's move on to the awards. Okay, can we do it? Yes, this is a good part. At every event like this, you always hear how great all of the entries were, because that's a nice thing that people say. But it's actually true this time. Like, the judges were twisted in knots trying to figure out who to give the award to. We had very long phone calls about it, people making impassioned cases about everything. So I also want to mention, in addition to the winners that we are about to introduce, there are many finalists this year in the room, and we are so glad that you can be here. All of their projects are detailed in your folders. You'll get a chance to look at it later, but The Atlantic, ProPublica, with Wisconsin Watch, and the New York Times Magazine, NBC News, the Boston Globe, the Texas Trib, ProPublica, Vote Beat, the Boston Globe again, Chicago Trib, Santa Cruz Local, the Houston Chronicle, and the Texas Trib. Thanks to all of the finalists, and many of you are here tonight. Okay, we're going to get started here by presenting the Toner Prize for Excellence in Local Political Reporting. The winners tonight are reporters Spencer Kent and Riley Yates from New Jersey Advanced Media for their Project Extreme series. As they take the stage, I will tell you that the judges lauded your storytelling and reporting in the series as both riveting and courageous, a well-written examination of the different forms of extremism, the people affected by it, and the threat that that presents to democracy. So terrific writing and reporting. Please welcome Spencer Kent and Riley Yates from New Jersey Advanced Media.
Thank you very much. I'm Spencer Kent. I want to thank the Newhouse School and the Toner Prize judges for recognizing our work. And I want to thank the people who brought this story together. I want to thank Riley Yates, who's by my side throughout this entire project, Matt Gray, Brianna Kudich, Andre Malik, my editor Jeff Roberts, and Chris Kelly, our Vice President of Content, who gives the time and resources to understand how this issue was unfolding in our state. We spent nearly a year on this project. The nation was divided, and real questions existed about the future of our democratic norms. The question that we faced was whether New Jersey, a traditionally moderate state, was a place to examine this topic. At the beginning, there was skepticism by long-serving politicians who thought these elements were too fringe to make any kind of impact. Finding an answer required showing up. It required attending meetings and gatherings, large and small, to understand how activists and influencers were creating division, demonizing vulnerable groups, and resonating with many people in a state usually known for its middle-of-the-road politics. We saw the way social media was being used to fuel discord and spread conspiracy theories, saw how easily young people were being radicalized online, and we saw how local officials, some of just small towns, faced intimidation and threats, including threats of violence. Not only had extremism taken root in a moderate state like New Jersey, it flourished. Lastly, I wanted to say that these are challenging times for reporters. We too face threats and intimidation, and the work is going to get harder. But I'm proud to be part of it, and I believe we as journalists must continue to be bold and brave and take on stories that aren't always easy to tell. Thank you very much.
think it's because I'm short. I'm trying to, okay. Let me know if you can still hear me, okay. Okay, so next, and congrats again to Spencer and Riley. Next, I wanted to share with you, we're gonna move to the Toner Prize for Excellence in National Political Reporting. We want to recognize an honorable mention in this category, and it is the team at Politico that reported a series called Biden's Billions. These are reporters Jesse Blazer, Kelsey Tamburino, Benjamin Starro, Zach Coleman, David Ferris, Timothy Kama, and Christine Mui. Judges praised the meticulous and dogged reporting inside every agency, which delivered a very well-written narrative, one after the other, that documented both successes and failures of the Biden agenda. And here to accept this honor for honorable mention are Zach Coleman, Benjamin Starro, and Kelsey Tamburino for Politico.
Thank you to everybody here. It's a tremendous honor to be with all of you tonight. Thank you to the speakers. I feel like I got a little wind in my sails listening to you all tonight to go fight the fight again tomorrow. So thank you for that. The two things I will say about this project were, first and foremost, the scale and the ambition of what Biden attempted. It touched every segment of society. So just getting our heads around that was a huge effort, and it required a huge team. And we are just the tip of the iceberg. There's probably 24 people who contributed to this project. And in true form, we were all doing like, who's gonna speak, who's gonna speak? Because everybody was just really collaborative and really worked together, and so that's what's going to stick for me, and it's really gratifying to get the recognition for that. So thank you.
Okay, drum roll. And finally, by the way, can I just say something else? If you have not had a chance to deep dive on all of the stories in all of the packages from all of the winners, I know you have other stuff to read, like, because it's sort of a busy news time, but I wasn't even a judge, but being in the final call, I read up on everything at the same time so I could receive the judges' decisions. Like, these stories are really incredible. I really, really recommend to read when you have a chance. So, finally, we are honoring tonight the winners of the Toner Prize for Excellence in National Political Reporting. They are Peter Eisler, Ned Parker, Aram Roston, and Joseph Tanfani from Reuters for their series, The Politics of Menace. This is incredibly comprehensive reporting. Our judges praised the series not just for explaining the actions taken and their impact, but also the grievances empowered. It is a well-documented look at the growth of combat politics, combative political forces, and the ferocity of our culture wars and cultural clashes today. Please welcome to the stage now our winners, Pete Eisler, Ned Parker, Aram Roston, and Joseph Tanfani from Reuters.
All right. So this is what happens. You get here, and then your colleagues say to you, "Hey, you talk a lot. You get up and say something." So this is my punishment. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Syracuse University. Thank you to the Newhouse School. Thank you to the judges. It requires an enormous amount of time and commitment to judge these contests, and we're really grateful for all that you did. And particularly, we want to thank all of the other finalists. The work here was just incredible. To say that it's humbling to be among these projects is an understatement. I really do urge you to read all of the work. We are just, again, thank you to the judges, because this obviously could have been a coin flip. So we really appreciate that. And we want to thank our team at Reuters. We want to thank our editors, including Jason Zepp, our line editor. We want to thank the designers and the photographers and the graphic artists who helped make the stories look so great and made them more powerful for their work. And we want to thank all of our fellow reporters at Reuters. The reporters at Reuters work tirelessly to put out an incredible news report every single day. They're doing the hard work, and they are building the credibility that we enjoy, and we all are here standing on their shoulders. I mean, it's just, we couldn't be more proud of the people that we work with. I'm going to be uncharacteristically brief. We've heard a lot tonight about the challenges that we face in this business, and that the importance of what we do and what we're trying to do every day. And I guess what we would like to do is sort of impart a message of optimism to you all. We have a little bit of perspective. You could probably tell by looking at us up here. We're not new to this. We're not new to this game. I got my first job as a reporter 40 years ago this year at the Regional Shopper and Reporter, a weekly in Colchester, Connecticut, covering the chicken farming industry. I once ran into someone about 20 years later from Colchester who said, we were talking, and I said, "Oh, you're from Colchester. I used to work there at the Regional Shopper and Reporter." They put shopper first because the coupon thing was what people really came for. And the person, we got to talking, and it turned out that they had a clipping on their refrigerator of a short profile that I had written of, I think, their grandmother 20 years earlier at the Reach. So when you talk about the impact of local journalism, ask yourself, how many people have a clipping of, yesterday's Reuters story 20 years from now on their refrigerator? So I just want to say that. But I think that the message that we'd like to leave would be sort of a message of optimism and a message of hope. To urge all of you who are working now, all of you who are looking for work, to stick with it, to continue to care, to keep fighting the good fight, because I think and I hope and I believe that we can all look forward to the day when we will be talking to the next generation of journalism students, or maybe the generation of journalism students after that, and we will be telling them about how we worked in the dark times and we faced down the efforts to destroy our credibility and to destroy our profession and to make us irrelevant. And we persevered, and we came out on the side of light and the side of truth and the side of good, and everybody will look at us and say, wow, that must have been really exciting to do that. And we're going to say, yeah, you know what, it was. Thank you.
How wonderful is that? Thank you, Margaret, and congratulations once again to all of our Toner Prize winners this year. Your work and the work of all the journalists in this room remain vitally important. They echo the kind of great writing and in-depth reporting for which Robin Toner was known. At Newhouse, of course, our commitment to free speech and freedom of the press is visible on the glass walls of our outstanding Newhouse 3 building, where the words are inscribed in giant lettering visible for all to see. We also believe in the importance of civil dialogue and a respectful exchange of ideas. For the reporters and editors here today, I can't stress enough just how much your work contributes to reinforcing these freedoms and core values, just like Robin Toner's body of work. So let me say once again, thank you all for being here tonight and for your continued support of the Toner program. Now, please join us for our dessert reception right next door. Thanks for coming, everyone.